Maybe big data has gotten too big. Whether you're a B2B marketer or a consumer brand, your data needs to be viable, relevant, and accessible so that Stirista can help you retain customers, acquire customers, and make it personal.
Welcome to the Marketing Stir podcast by Stirista, probably the most entertaining marketing podcast you're going to put in your ear. I'm Vin, the producer here at Stirista. The goal of this podcast is to chat with industry leaders and get their take on the current challenges of the market, and we'll have a little fun along the way. In today's episode, Aaron Wollner, the Chief Marketing Officer at Quontic, chats with us about how technology and user experience connects customer service reps with customers effectively. Give it a listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello. It is me, Vincent Petrofesso. That must mean it is the Marketing Stir. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all the amazing, kind words that you're emailing us, that you are telling AJ and I when you see us at conferences. What a nice treat when people come up to you and are like, wait a minute, hey, I listen to you while I'm working out. I'm like, well, that can't be that motivational, but whatever, sir. Keep on listening. I appreciate it. But it's so good to be here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Just talk about Stirista. It's the first time you're ever listening to the podcast, the Marketing Stir, stirring things up, Stirista. We're having a conversation. Let's pause and talk about Stirista just for like 14 seconds. Maybe it's more than that, but who are we? We are a marketing technology company. We own our own business-to-business data, business-to-consumer data. We help companies access that data and help them get new customers. New customers are fun. Who doesn't want new customers? We do that through our own email sending, our own DSP, connected TV. Email me, vincent@stirista.com. I, of course, am the Vice President of B2B products and partnerships. I only deal in B2B, but we do all of it. So email me, I'll point you in the right direction. You are emailing me, which I do appreciate. Not all the time is it for what I intend, but it's okay. You're listening, and 9 times out of 10, you're trying to sell me. But hey, do your thing, man. Do your thing. It's so good to see this next person. He is my CEO, our Commander-in-Chief here at Stirista. He claims that shirt's pink, but I think it's orange because he can't escape the orange. That's our colors, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. AJ Gupta. What's up, AJ?
Hey, Vincent. Bright day here in Texas. I'm actually going to be headed this weekend to play a state tournament in Dallas. So we'll see a true test of human spirit when we're playing in 105 to 110 degrees.
I know, it's crazy. That's all I keep hearing in the news is like all of down south, just that whole area is just record highs. I'm like, that is awful. That's awful.
Yeah. So, and I think Dallas is slightly hotter than San Antonio. So I can't, it's hard to imagine what hotter than San Antonio feels like, but we're about to find out in the next day or two.
That is crazy. I'm so glad you did not have anything there this summer. I remember we're going to have like a little, get the team together. We're like, what? Are you nuts? It's August in San Antonio. No way. Let's save it to September, which isn't much different, I would imagine. But hey, I'm sure it's like 3 degrees cooler. But it's great.
I think you'll find the difference between 105 and 98 to be quite different.
Oh, I would imagine if that happens in New York City, it's shut down. They shut New York City down. Everyone's opening up fire hydrants, which you could do apparently. I've seen that many a times in New York, and I'm sure our guest coming up has seen that, having lived in New York before. But yeah, people ask me all the time, the question I get asked all the time about you, AJ, is AJ really good in tennis? I was like, I don't know why are they judging you? What are they judging you for? I was like, no, he's good, legitimately. And it pains me to say something nice about him, but especially athletic wise, but he's actually good in tennis. People follow tennis. US Open's coming up. So that should be a fun time of tennis. So yeah, no, you are actually good. I was surprised.
I think you told that ping pong story so many times that people really started questioning my athletic abilities.
Yeah, they did. Well, I don't know how much athletic ability ping pong takes, especially the type we were playing at a holiday party after a few beverages, ladies and gentlemen. But you got to see some people in the park here in New York City. I walked by these two people playing in the park. These guys are like on fire. I'm like, this is crazy. But yeah, I wasn't like that. Maybe it was beginner's luck, sort of like your fantasy football season last year.
Oh, all
Oh,
right. Shots
shots
fired.
fired, ladies and gentlemen, because the season's about to start. But enough about us. I will see you very soon in New York City. And I hope to see this next guest in New York City one day. He's no longer here. He left, which I'm very upset about. But I knew when I talked to him, and our producers know this, and AJ, you even know this. You're like, how do you know someone used to live in New York? How do you know they used to be an East Coaster? I feel it. It's in our bones. And I'm sad that he's no longer here in New York, but we are going to get together, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm very excited for you to talk to this company, Quontic. It's a very unique company. I love the concept. I think the world needs this right now. Ladies and gentlemen, he's the Chief Marketing Officer of Quontic. Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Wollner. What's going on, Aaron?
Hey Vincent, how are you?
Doing great, doing great. Awesome to talk to you again. Yes, why did you leave New York? That's not one of the questions I was like, why did you leave New York City?
Um, I guess I'm a follower, right? So mid pandemic, there really was this bizarre exodus, right? I think that things got all shuffled, and you sort of lost perspective, right? Because um, one thing every New Yorker shares is the love for their neighborhood, right? Like you love Tribeca, that's your neighborhood, and there's a relationship there. So my last stop for the last 5 years was Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn.
Yep, love it.
Um, and I had this like deep connection to my immediate area, which changed so much, right? Like, we don't need to rehash all the closings and the bizarre stuff that was happening at that time. But yeah, so all of that definitely affected my wife and I, and we just sort of found it to be the right time to pick up the family and move down south a little bit to where we're from. So we're currently in the Baltimore area. We both visit New York City regularly. Our offices are there, um, and we missed it. But it's less like of a daily missing. It's more like, hey, that was a hell of a time.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. And then you have ties to that area. Like you said, you're originally from where you are now. So I get it. And a lot of people don't realize, Aaron, and these are not my official questions I want to ask. I'll get to those in a moment. But a lot of people don't realize that when you're in New York City, there are neighborhoods, and you are very much like, it's rare that I
mhm.
go outside of the neighborhood, believe it or not. If it's like, when someone now is like, oh, let's meet in Times Square, I'm like, oh, really? Times Square? Are you crazy? But anyway, well, we're glad that you'll be coming back to visit, and we'll definitely get together. But Aaron, let's get into it here. Quontic, for the people listening, tell us about Quontic, and obviously the CMO role. Generally, we people know what that entails, but tell us, sometimes there's different nuances. So Quontic and what your role specifically involves there.
Yeah. So we're a digital bank. So we're a financial institution that exists completely online. That's sort of like the very basic definition. What sets us apart, and I think that's kind of my job and some of the branding that I've worked on. I just passed my 3-year mark at Quontic, so nice little milestone for me personally, and a lot of my team that I brought in over the past couple of years have certainly helped a lot with this. But from a brand standpoint, what sets us apart is that we are a digital bank with a heart, and that needs to mean something because that sounds kind of nice, but where we landed was we have to acknowledge and accept the trade-off. If you're going fully digital and you're fully online, you're by definition less human, right? Um, and especially sort of given where we are, we were just talking about the pandemic. I do think that people sort of, at the end of the day, like connection matters, right? Good human customer service matters, and you see this all over the place across different industries. Customer service being sort of emphasized, brought back stateside, and that real emphasis on just amazing customer service and how that creates a long-term business model. So all of that to say is that we acknowledge that, and where that brought us to was um, a more humane place for the digital bank, right? So We do have all sorts of new and interesting ways for you to interact with our people. And so we have the digital bank side of the business, we have the mortgage lending side of the business. Um, and there are some pretty cool differentiating things from both of those sides. From the digital bank side, we're innovative, and we could talk a little bit more about that. I'm sure it'll come up in different examples, but we put pressure on ourselves to innovate, come up with new stuff, experiment, and I think that sets us apart. And then on the mortgage side, we are CDFI, which is another acronym. We're acronyms all over the place, but Community Development and Financial Institution. And so we actually have a mandate to help people to lend to the underbanked, the underserved, and there's a lot that goes into that, and I can go into more of that definition, but there is that humane aspect in terms of who we're lending to, and it's a lot of the time what other big financial institutions won't do, and we found a really good risk averse way to figure that out. So a lot goes into it, but at the end of the day, we are a best in class digital bank with a heart.
No, I love that. And we do have a lot of questions around digital banking, the differentiators, why you think people are doing it. We'll get to that in a moment, but there's a few questions that if we don't ask are staple questions, boy, do our listeners get angry. So let's take it to that second question I have for you is, how did you get started in marketing? People love hearing this story because 9 times out of 10, it's like I was a religion major and here I am doing marketing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd love to hear your story.
yeah, it's like oops, right? Like I think every CMO is like, oops, here I am. So similar story. So I was a political science major, business minor. I flipped those two. Initially, I was a business major, but studying business. I don't know if you went to business school or anything. Studying business is it's just this weird. Um, it's a weird thing to study, right? Because it's such a practical practice thing that when you're in it, it just like that's where you learn all your hard knocks and your lessons, and you gain all that experience. Like studying the basic principles of marketing, um, it's just fundamentals, and it's sort of like made up words for very practical things that we sort of inherently know anyway. But all that to say, yeah, I accidentally fell into it. My first job out of school about 17 years ago was with this really amazing Martech startup by the name of Optimos. So we were first to market with multivariate testing, right? So every marketer worth his salt is doing some form of testing and experimentation, A/B testing, web pages, products. What like we're testing and measuring, and that's kind of just an accepted approach for marketers, sort of across the board. But we were first to market with a technology that allowed websites in like 2006 and 2007, 2008, before we got acquired a couple of times, which was its own interesting journey, to break down web pages into individual parts and to test them through regression analysis and applying advanced statistics. And that's really what set me along my path, because what I found there was the marriage between hard numbers and the measurability of marketing. And up until that point, marketing was fluff. I really sort of saw it as the fluffy stuff. And so that's sort of when I fell in love with marketing and the and sort of the harder side of marketing and what it really means to a business. So off I went. I joined Sapient, which is now Publicis, shortly thereafter. Spent a number of years on the agency side, working on mostly big projects for big businesses, and that's where I sort of cut my teeth and got serious about all the rigors of managing a big project and the marketing fundamentals and helping big companies figure out complex problems, really from the consulting angle. And then I sort of found my way into more fintechs, right? Because most of my clients from the beginning just ended up being financial institutions, Bank of America, American Express, City National Bank. So this sort of was a natural progression. And eventually I joined a fintech as the head of marketing, and found my way to Quontic a number of years ago. So yeah, I mean, specializing in marketing, the common thread throughout really being data analytics, and trying to be the master of marketing from that numbers angle, even when it comes to the fluffy stuff, right? Even when it comes to the brand side. And so that's sort of who I am as a marketer. My journey was not a straight one, a lot of zigs, a lot of zags. And I think I'd love to hear that 1 out of 10 you alluded to, who was like, yes, I was like out of the gate as a young man, right? Or a young woman. My ambition was to be a CMO. Yeah, I'd like to talk to that person.
Awesome, Aaron. Hey, I know you guys are a digital bank, so we're curious whether that lends itself to digital marketing being the primary channel, or are there strategies you guys use to market as well?
Primarily digital, which you would sort of assume. But actually, this is a recent story. So last week, a few folks on my team went down to Orlando. There was the big Florida mortgage convention. So we went down to support sales, and really more from a research standpoint. And we got together, and this is also blends into the fact that we're all remote. So I try and find good, meaningful spots for some people on my team to get together. So anyway, all this stuff sort of came together. One of the things that we did outside of anything sort of mortgage convention related was we packaged up 500 mailers ourselves, and we did a little campaign. We did a physical mailer, and the insert basically was nice fun copy about the only thing you'll miss from traditional banking is the lollipops that you used to get from the desk, right? I think we can all remember that experience as kids, right? And we actually dropped 5 dum-dums, not lollipops, with this sort of nice, message, this like little clever wink, which is a part of our brand. We're constantly trying to like find these nice little moments to just wink at our customers in a fun way. Um, and yeah, so we actually, there was clearly a marketing goal there. So we pinpointed our 500 lowest balance high yield savings customers, and we mailed them this fun little thing. There was no QR code to like, yay, increase your deposit now, or our high yield savings is up to 4.5%, which is top of market. We didn't do any of that. This really was sort of a delight, sort of feel good, physical moment where we wanted to sort of touch a small subset of our customers. So that's an example of non-digital, but the lion's share, by and large, where we're spending money, where we're spending time, is completely digital.
And Aaron, has the marketing strategy itself changed because of some of the economic changes that are happening at a macro level in the banking industry?
Yes, but not as much as I feared, right? And fear is the operative word, right? Like a potential run on the bank is a very scary thing. And so in Q1, we all know about SVB and the handful of banks that essentially went under, right? And there really was a literal run on the bank. Each sort of had its individual dynamics, and thank goodness it didn't spread. But I remember coming back from like a meeting, and I'm just in an Uber, and the driver was listening to talk radio, basically talk about how they're stuffing cash like under their mattress, right? So CMO of a bank, I'm hearing this stuff and just sort of feeling this stuff and thinking, oh my goodness, like how much trouble, how much is this going to sort of spread, right? How much fear of banking um, is going to spread and really sort of change things, and therefore change the way we market and communicate to customers and prospective customers. So the truth is we adjusted a little bit. Thankfully, that didn't impact us directly. I mean, we saw a downward blip, but it wasn't anything significant in terms of losing a big chunk of customers. And we actually benefited from it a little bit, because I do think that it was the more regional banks that were directly affected. And so it's this interesting dynamic of if you've got regional banks in the middle, and then on the other side, you've got, the massive financial institutions, Citi, Bank of America, and so on. Then on the other side of the spectrum is the more nimble digital sort of fintech type banks. So I think it sort of spread a little bit from the middle. And we actually benefited from that a little bit. I think there was an increase you saw it in search and just how active people were in terms of moving money after that happened. And so we ended up benefiting from that a bit, which is really interesting. But the short answer to your question is yes, I think we changed our tone a little bit. I mentioned that part of our brand is to try and bring some joy and find those moments to, wink and sort of celebrate a little bit. Um, and we're doing that less, right? Because I think there's a little bit more of a serious time from a macroeconomic standpoint. But thankfully, not all that much has changed. I think that if you asked me 4 months ago, I would have, I would have been way more scared. And our tone did change pretty dramatically for a period there. But I think we're back to sort of trying to be ourselves and recapture our sort of brand voice.
Aaron, the first thing that I think of, right, with digital banking is, all right, well, where do I find an ATM? What do I do there? Like what happens? I'm sure that's common. So how does, Quontic address that piece of it? And also is Quontic not only personal banking, but is it mortgage loans as well? Talk to me all about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we do have a network. Obviously, these are not Quontic branded ATMs. That wouldn't make much business sense. But we have a network actually of 90,000 ATMs across the country. So more or less, wherever you may be, it's not difficult to take out cash. Now, is it as easy as Bank of America? No, but that's not the game we're playing. But we do want to make sure that it's accessible and that that part of banking, that the cash exchange part of banking through ATMs is not problematic. So we figured that piece out, we feel like, just through our network of 90,000 ATMs across the country. But at the same time, you know, um, how many financial apps do you have on your phone, for example? More than
Two.
one?
Yeah, about two, maybe one. One for sure, maybe two.
Well, I think two is on the low end, right? I've got like seven or eight. I think the average person has a few, right?
Yeah.
Um, which means that people are not having that one-to-one banking relationship, and so we benefit from that. And in fact, I've run campaigns with my team directly hitting on that. And so we did a little experiment through a few sort of more social type channels about being your side bank, right? Just like having a side relationship. Like it's okay, we get it. We're not trying to be your main squeeze. Like just try us out, right? Open up a high yield savings account, open up any sort of different checking account. We offer a Bitcoin rewards checking account, which is pretty amazing. So so yeah, but I think that it really depends on your perspective. But I think strategically for me, what I've learned over the years is if you could find the right way to turn a weakness into a strength, that can really sort of set you on a path to success. So for me, I tried to use that notion that I have to have this big sprawling financial institution, right? That I can trust. And if I'm going to be on a road trip through Kentucky, like I'm not going to think twice about it. Um, Again, that's basically true for us as well. But we leaned into that a little bit. We leaned into the fact that you may not think about a digital bank as having that sort of coverage or trust, but yeah. So we actually found some success from a messaging standpoint with that too.
That's awesome. And you think, like you said, there's not much in regular banking. I couldn't tell you the last time I talked to a teller, right? When's the last time you go in and you talk to a teller? But I'm sure people still want that some personal touch, whether it's a customer service rep or being able to talk to
Yeah.
someone. How does Quantic kind of combat that? How do you lean into that?
Totally. Yeah. So technology plays a role, and I think user experience, right, which is more more the area that my team can directly help with. So we've partnered up with a company called Glia, which happens to be specifically for financial institutions, but it's a video chat tool, right? And there's lots of different functionality and components to it. But basically, we want to make sure that you can see and interact with Quontic, right? It's not a robot. Yes, a robot may be involved in the sort of the initial touch point or not, right? That's kind of up to you and based on the experience. Um, but that partnership really helps sort of solve that problem, because it's one thing to say that, hey, bank human, bank Quontic, right? But show me that. Like, where is that? Can you interact with a human? And so we solve for that. We solve for that through, if you go to our contact us page, you can interact with that, tool in the bottom right. You can see our customer service reps, right? You can co-browse. You can hang out if you want, right? But we do have a small but mighty team of real people who care, who are great, and that part of the business has really been a focus for the past couple of years. The other thing is bringing that to life. So again, these are all sort of web pages. If everything's digital, it needs to sort of have this practical, element to it. If you go to the contact us page, we need to show you that. And so you'll see, the first thing you'll see when you load up the contact us page is a rotating video of real customer service reps waving at you that you're likely to see if you click into the Glia tool. So my team helps solve that with the customer service team, and I think again that's a good example of it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it and prove it. And I think for us, we were able to actually figure that piece out.
And you've worked at kind of a number of startups and high growth type companies. What advice do you have for people that are trying to build up marketing teams in high growth companies?
It's really hard. I wish it weren't as hard as it is. But so the big thing that I learned is the tension between the need for short term, immediate, big growth, right? Like that traditional hockey stick that every startup, they have a chart that says, hey, here's what we can do, right? And then go do it. And then a lot of that falls on the marketing team or the head of marketing, whoever that is, versus the long-term health, right? And longer-term metrics. And I think, most startups, it's funny what becomes sort of trendy or popular. Like metrics are trendy, actually. If you sort of step back and think about like what metrics, we all care about, or, the traditional sort of startup cares about. Like this whole LTV CAC business, it's been around for like 5+ years. Like everyone's obsessed with it. That might not be the metric for you in that moment at that time, right? So I think the biggest piece of advice I could give is don't just accept the common metric, the stylish, trendy metric that you were handed. Challenge that, right? Know that there are different paths to growth. There's a difference between pursuing volume versus quality, the business model, and where it's at in its maturity. And if you're early stage, right, maybe you do care about just true conversion and not longer term LTV type metrics, because you know what? A lot of LTV math that a lot of businesses have, it's just funny math, right? It's a lot of assumptions baked into this model that may or may not be fully true. So yeah, I think it's super hard, but being choosy. One of the things that I try and teach my teams is what we choose from a metric standpoint, be it a campaign or just a broader strategy. That's where the skill is, right? I think that really is a skill set to know and have an intuition about what metric and what goal to pursue given the situation. For early stage startups, it can be really tough.
In terms of kind of Quontic's business in particular, was there something that drew you into the company when you first started?
Totally. Yeah. I think it actually had a really great story. And I think that, people at the end of the day connect with a narrative. And then the Quontic story, starting as this sort of sleepy, humble community bank outside of New York City, and becoming this national digital bank with this very human side to it, helping people, giving back, doing good. Um, I just love the story. So the story was a big piece of it. I felt like as a CMO, there's a lot that I can do with that. That was sort of baked in because a lot of times, you really struggle to create a brand. At the end of the day, like a brand, I don't know. How would you define a brand? Is a good question to ask anybody. How would you guys define a brand?
I would
Well,
say, oh, go ahead, AJ.
no, go ahead.
I would say a brand is anything that has a partnership or connection with their customers. A brand is anything that you are selling, or your messaging, your persona. I kind of tie those words in with a brand. How about you, AJ?
It's sort of kind of the sum total of how the world views you. So um, I've always said, being from the services and solutions side, if we were to sell T-shirts, would probably get more respect as a brand uh, than a solutions provider walking down the floor.
So the reason why I love those answers is because it shows um, that you could really you could answer it in
Different
any a
ways.
brand is. And so, Vincent, you had that more micro approach. You were describing the individual components that are a part of a brand, right? And then AJ, you talked about the sum total. And I'm more of a big picture person. I love details too. But I think at the end of the day, when you think about a brand, it is macro. And of course, underneath the hood are all those things you talked about, Vincent. But the sum total of those things is, I would argue, a feeling, right? So, um, what's your favorite tennis brand, AJ?
I use the Babolat rackets, and yeah,
People love Baba, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, any sort of relationship that you have with a brand, I think there's some connection and some feeling to it, but it's the sum total, right? And so,
right,
did that tennis company do one thing that resulted in its brand? Probably not, almost definitely not. But all the things
right.
put together and all their initiatives and tactics and promotions and sponsorships and the product itself, of course. Yeah, so I love these sorts of conversations. But yeah, from a brand standpoint, and from a story standpoint, Quantic really attracted me. And then, of course, the second part of this answer is going to be much quicker: the people. And I think at the end of the day, what keeps people what keeps people in their job? If you were to sort of drill down, and what is the number one thing that keeps people in their job? It's people. It's the other people that they work with. And there's a lot that comes out of that, right? Like, I feel like I'm being micromanaged, or I have no control. All those negative things that come with, surrounding yourself with maybe not the right people at work, right? And that might sort of force you to look for something else. At the end of the day, it is all about the people. And we've got a great leadership team and a great group here.
I love being asked questions. It's not often we get asked questions, and you're right. It's kind of like I once heard a statement where they're like, "No, your brand." It's like, "Oh, this is my brand." It's like, "No, your brand is how people perceive you." So it's like people make your brand. That's kind of how they see it. That's I like that. I like that question because you're right. It's like two people, just different answers, and
Yeah.
that's kind of how you think about it. Let's stay on brand here in the sense you mentioned in the beginning, New York City. It was kind of almost a regional bank, if you will. And then you started scaling nationwide. What was that process like? What did you find? What were some of the challenges, Aaron?
Yeah, it was fast and furious. So obviously there's like the compliance piece, and we had to like grow our legal counsel. So there was real, practical back end stuff that we needed to do to get that national charter. But once we had that in place, it was actually going out and sort of proving to ourselves that we could, from a bank perspective, it's more straightforward because once you have that national charter, and especially if you're online, if someone applies online for a checking product from Montana, we now have a customer in Montana, right? So there's not much to that. However, with the mortgage lending side, it really is more complicated because you need to have people sort of selling in those areas. So it was more challenging from a mortgage standpoint. But it actually happened quite quickly once we got all the pieces in place.
Aaron, one of our staple questions here on Marketing Stir has to do around LinkedIn. I'm sure with kind of the places you've worked and the titles you've held, you get a number of unsolicited messages on LinkedIn. So would love to know what's a message that gets a response from you and what's one that really annoys you.
Yeah, they're mostly annoying, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
So let's start there. So I don't like I like to assume people are smart. I think this is just very broad philosophy, right? Like, do you assume people are smart or not? And I think like tricking people is really sort of undercutting that optimistic philosophy. So anyway, all of that to say, like, I can tell if you're tricking me, right? like a message that is sort of um, where the subject line might say like hey, like following up, or even like go Terps. I went to University of Maryland, the Maryland Terrapins, right? Like, and that's not even necessarily tricking. That's just more of like obviously an approach, but it insinuates like you know me, you know my background. So yeah, I think more often than not, it can be perceived as like, do you think you're actually like getting one over on me, or even pretending like they found an issue with something, or that it's an existing relationship? Like all that stuff doesn't work in my opinion. So assume positive intent, assume people are smart, and look, starting a conversation is never easy. And I think that over the past few years, where LinkedIn really has become um, incredibly popular, and therefore it's brought in all this mass marketing and all this outreach that we see today. It's hard. I think it's really hard to cut through the clutter. I'm trying to think about what cuts through as a real offer. Actually, I think this may have originated on LinkedIn, if I'm not mistaken. So so yeah, I think if you've got a real proposition, if you've got a real conversation, if you've got a real value prop, it's never easy because you're cutting through the clutter. But yeah, so expect to be ignored, I think, largely speaking, but don't try and trick people.
I like that. It's like you assume people are smart, but I also feel like a lot of the things that are sent are bots. That it's hello, Aaron, you work at Quontic Incorporated. I'm like, come on, who says incorporated? Like, no one says that. I think so. Yeah, it's one of those things you gotta have to be careful. But yeah, it's funny, after 140, 145 of these, there's never been a marketing professional on the podcast who's been like, just send me 17 messages and make them, very impersonal. But yeah, it's kind of that, you got certain things have to stick. So Aaron, we're getting to the end of the podcast here. Personally, let's get to know you personally. What do you like doing on the weekends? You have the family there. What, some hobbies? What do you like doing? Who do you root for sports wise? I'm wondering. You've been in New York a long time, but you're from that area. Is it the DC teams? Is it the Baltimore teams? Talk to us.
Yeah, it's I'm hometown, so I grew up in the DC, Maryland area. So it's those teams. There's some overlap with Baltimore because the Washington Nationals didn't exist when I was coming up. So it's nice to actually, we currently, my wife and I and child live in the Baltimore area, and so it's cool to sort of have that home team back, but actually be 15 minutes from the stadium. So I've gone to a bunch of games. Yeah, hobbies. Last night I played hockey. So I play hockey twice a week. I'm on 2 different ice hockey teams. So I keep that up, and every year that goes by, then I'm still playing and kind of competing. I think AJ, you can relate. It's like thank goodness that like I'm still. I don't know. I'm feeling really thankful these days that I can still sort of go out there and compete and be productive and play kind of a physical game. I think with age you just get more appreciation with that stuff. Um, so yeah, I mean between the family and we my wife has 3 siblings in the area. For example, we covered for my brother and sister-in-law. We had their kids at our house for a couple of days, so there's always family stuff going on. I love barbecuing and grilling and hosting and exploring the city. We sort of split our time, weekend trips. We had to go into the city, just check out restaurants and stuff in Baltimore. Or there's a bunch of farms and breweries and wineries, 20, 30, 40 minutes away as well. So love taking little road trips, love hopping on my bike. I miss biking. I bike rarely, but I miss in New York City, I was on my bike basically daily. Um, so as a fairly new suburbanite, I'm sort of reorienting and sort of refining some of these hobbies also.
Yeah. No, that's amazing because like you said, the Chesapeake Bay. There's all these different areas there where you think Baltimore. You think like that downtown area with Phillips. What's that little harbor? But there's so many great things about the breweries. That's awesome, and I love that stadium. My goodness, the where the Orioles play is beautiful. Probably one of the nicest stadiums. I remember going to a game there, and my hotel room could see right into the stadium. It was pretty. Pretty unique. But that's amazing, Aaron. We appreciate you sharing your story with us, ladies and gentlemen. Check out Quontic out there. If you're banking, you're looking to get away from the traditional guy, or like you said, a second option there. But really look into them. That's Aaron Wollner, ladies and gentlemen. He's the Chief Marketing Officer at Quontic. This has been another episode of the Marketing Stir. That's AJ. I'm Vincent. Let's hope Team Stirista wins in Dallas, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Stir podcast by Stirista. Please like, rate, and subscribe. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, please email us at themarketingstir@stirista.com. And thanks for listening.